We're called to love our neighbors. And what is it going to take? Let me just pull out some principles from this parable. And by the way, let me tell you, I can't read this parable without thinking of a visit I made to two of our missionaries in Ethiopia, Trent and Tabby Cox. They're serving with a just-reached tribe in Ethiopia. And while I was visiting them in a very remote area in Ethiopia, we went for a hike. Brian Dubois was with me, as well as Scott Edwards. And we were in a hut having a church service. And Tabby was asked to teach that day. And she was teaching this just-reached tribe and telling them the story of the Good Samaritan, except for her, she replaced the word Samaritan for the word mercy. Because to the tribe we were ministering to, and that they are ministering to, their enemy were the mercy people. Even though their name was Mercy, they were anything but merciful. They were cannibals. And they had come in and attacked this tribe time and time again. And I'll never forget, in this hut, with the fire glowing in the middle, and Tabby telling the story, and Trent translating for me what she's saying, the look of horror on the faces of the people as they first heard the story of the Good Samaritan, but for them it was the good mercy warrior. Anyway, I digress. Here we go. Here's 4 essentials to loving our neighbor. Here's the first. You got to have compassion. In verse 33, it says the Samaritan, who was an enemy of the Jews, had what the religious elite didn't. The paid professionals, the Levites, the priests, they walked by the other side, but the Samaritan had compassion on him. The NIV says he took pity on him. Compassion means to be so moved emotionally, your gut is wrenched. This guy had his heart broken over the plight of what he saw along the road. And it moved him to action. Here's a component of compassion that's actually unique to compassion. It will always move to action. You can be merciful and do nothing about it, but you can't have compassion and remain idle. Can I ask you a question? What breaks your heart? What wrenches your gut? What injustice is out there that you go, I can't stand this anymore? Our culture would tell you, run away from that. Anesthetize yourself from it. But Jesus would tell you, run right to it and let that injustice burn in you until you say, I've got to do something about it. It's the injustice of what's going on in the schools in Redwood City that's drawn us to do this beautiful day endeavor, that's driven a lot of our missions of mercy at the VA hospital, or with people in the sex trade industry that are caught up in slavery, or the many other missions of mercy that we do. The first element in loving your neighbor is have compassion for your neighbor. Just think about your neighbors and get behind their eyes and try to understand life from their perspective and let God burn in you a compassion. It doesn't end there though. The next thing in loving your neighbor, you got to have contact. You can't love from afar. At some point, this Samaritan stopped and touched the wounded person. We've got to have a touch as well. We can't love from a distance. And you know what this takes? Time. It takes putting up maybe with some offensive language and offensive habits so that we can love people the way God does, the way God did with us. Aren't you grateful? All that God did in putting up with our sin time and time again, and then demonstrated his love for us so that we could be born again. There's a third element here, and it's care. You've got to do something with yourself and care for the people. Provide tangible value to them. In our culture especially, that's how they're going to understand love. We can say we love them, but you know what? Talk is cheap. We've got to do something with our love. We've got to add tangible value to them. We got to serve them. We've got to add an upgrade. What does that mean for you? There's one other element you need to know about. It's this: cost. If you're going to love people, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost some of us time. That's a high commodity in our culture. It's going to cost us financially. It's going to be an investment. But I would just say this: it's so worth it. Let me frame this another way. What price would you pay on one person coming to Christ? How valuable is that to you? Is that worth your time? Seeing someone come to Christ, your neighbor, a family member? What monetary price would you pay to see someone come to Christ? Is it worth it to purchase a Bible for them or to purchase a meal for them? If that would lead them to Christ, I think none of us would say, oh, I'm not willing to pay that price. Gang, we're called to love this city and this peninsula. And if we're going to love, it's going to be costly, but it's worth it. So as you break up into your groups, let me encourage you to talk through these questions. I want you to ask amongst yourself, what factors prevent you from following the command to love your neighbor? Why is that hard? I know that's not easy. Why is that hard to you? Be vulnerable and talk about that. Which of the 4 factors of loving my neighbor that we talked about are most challenging for you? Of the 4, which is the most challenging? Which is the hardest for you to live out? And then ask yourself, what's one tangible way that you could love your neighbor this week? What I dream of in our community is that we would be out all week long, loving our neighbors, out in the battle, taking our swords, doing battle, and then we'd come together and gather every Sunday and celebrate God's faithfulness, celebrate His goodness, celebrate His grace because we didn't live up to what we thought we would. And then we'd be encouraged by the Word, by the community, go back out again and continue to love our neighbors. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday. God bless you.